Hello, this is Vanessa from the Pudgy Rabbit, and today I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can embroider on eyes for your amigurumi. So often you'll see these safety eyes being used for amigurumi, and these are just plastic eyes that once you attach them on, they're very difficult to take off, and they're really good for toys or anything that might be handled a lot. So here are some safety eyes that I have. So you can see the eye part right here, and then on the back is a long plastic post, and you'll just insert this into your amigurumi and you'll attach it on using either a plastic or metal washer. They come in a ton of different sizes and colors, and they can add a really nice touch to your amigurumi. Sometimes it can be hard to find safety eyes in store, and ordering them online can get kind of pricey when you include shipping. So it's nice to have another option like embroidering your eyes on, so let's get started. Here's the supplies I'll be using today. I have some black worsted weight yarn, and here I have my yarn needle. I'll also be using some black pearl cotton, but you can use just regular black embroidery floss, and my pearl cotton is size 5, and then I also have my embroidery needle. So the first method I'm going to show you is a French knot, and here I have my yarn needle threaded with some of my black worsted weight yarn, and I'm going to bring the needle up through the back of my amigurumi's head and bring it up where I want the eye to be. And then I'll pull it almost all the way through, but just leaving a little bit of a tail. And here I'll use my ring finger and middle finger to kind of hold that tail in place. And then from the front, I'm going to use my pointer finger and thumb to hold the yarn. And then I'll place my yarn needle in front of my yarn strand like this. And then I'll wrap it around my needle once and then wrap it again, so twice. You can see how the yarn's wrapped around my needle, and then I'm going to turn the needle and insert it back into the head of my amigurumi, not in the same spot where I brought it up, but close by, so right next to it. And here at this point you want to make sure that the yarn that's wrapped around your needle is not pulled too tight or too loose, because if it's too tight and the head of your needle can't pass through, it'll end up pulling the wound yarn all the way through your head. So now we can just pull the needle all the way through. We'll pull it tight, and you can also pull from the tail end. And there we've made our first French knot eye. So turning to the back of the head, I'm just going to tie off these 2 ends. So now that we have the first eye done, let's make the second one. So I'm going to bring my yarn needle up through the back of my amigurumi head and bring it up where I want the eye to be. I'm going to pull it almost all the way through, but leaving a little bit of a tail. And again, I'm going to use my ring finger and middle finger to hold that tail in place. And from the front, I'm going to use my pointer finger and thumb to hold onto the yarn and creating a little bit of tension. I'm going to bring my yarn needle in front of the yarn thread and then wrap it around twice. Turn the yarn needle and then insert it back into the head, not in the same spot where I brought it up, but close by, kind of right next to it. And again, I want to make sure that my yarn isn't wrapped too tightly or too loose around my needle so that I can pull it smoothly through and not pull the wound yarn through the back of my head. There's my second eye. So now I can tie off the back. And that's how you use a French knot for eyes. The second method I'm going to show you is how to do a squinty eye. And here I have my embroidery needle and I've threaded it with some of my pearl cotton, but you can use regular embroidery floss. And to start, I'm going to bring my needle up through the back of my amigurumi head, and I'm going to bring it up where I want the center of my eye to be. And I'll pull it almost all the way through, leaving a little bit of a tail, and then use my ring finger and middle finger again to hold that tail in place. And then from the front, I'm going to angle my thread away from that first point. And then insert my needle back into the head, creating a diagonal line. Okay, there's the first part of the eye, and then I'm going to bring my needle back up through that first point where I brought my needle up, so back at that center of the eye. Pull it all the way through, and this time I'm going to angle the thread just straight out from that center point. And then insert my needle and pull it all the way through, creating a line straight across. And then I'm going to bring the needle back up through that center point of the eye. And I'll angle the thread away from that center point, creating another diagonal line. Pull tight. And there I've made my first squinty eye. Gonna knot off the ends in the back. Now for the second eye, again I'm going to bring my needle back through the head of my amigurumi up where I want the center of the eye to be, using my ring finger and middle finger to hold that tail end in place. I'm going to angle the thread at a diagonal from that first point where I brought up the needle. Then insert my needle back into the head, creating a diagonal line. And then I'm going to bring my needle back up through the first point, pull it all the way through, and now I'm going to bring the thread straight out from that center point. And then I'll bring my needle back up through that center point one last time. And then angle the thread at another diagonal from that center point, making one last diagonal line. And then I'll knot off the ends in the back. And that's how you embroider on some squinty eyes. The third method I'm going to show you is how to make a happy eye. And here I have my embroidery needle and I've threaded it with some black pearl cotton, but again you can use just regular black embroidery floss. And I'm going to start by bringing my needle up through the back of my amigurumi's head and then bringing the needle up where I want the eye to be. I'm going to pull it almost all the way through, leaving a little bit of a tail. And again, I'm going to use my ring finger and middle finger to hold that tail in place. And then I'm going to insert my needle kind of straight across from that first point where I came up. And I'm going to pull the thread almost all the way through, but I'm going to leave a little half loop. So pull it almost all the way through. You see this little half loop forming. And then when my loop is the size that I want, I'm going to use my thumb to kind of hold that loop in place, that half loop in place. I'm going to bring my needle back up through the head and I'm going to bring it up really close to the center point of the top of the loop. And then pull it all the way through. And then I'm going to cross the thread over the top of the half loop. And then when I insert my needle, I'm not going to insert back in that same spot. I'm going to insert really close. So essentially I'm making a small little stitch to hold the loop in place. And then I'm going to pull it tight. And then I can pull at the tail end and then use my needle to kind of adjust my loop until my eye looks the way that I want it to. And there I've made my happy eye. Okay, so I'm going to knot off the ends in the back. So we have our first happy eye, and now let's make our second one. So again, I'm going to bring the needle back up through the head of my amigurumi. I'm going to bring it up where I want the eye to be, and then pull it almost all the way through, leaving a little bit of tail and holding it in place with my ring finger and middle finger. And then I'm going to insert my needle straight across from that first point where I brought it up. And then pull the thread almost all the way through, but leaving a little half loop. Once that half loop is the size that I want it to be, I'm going to use my thumb to kind of hold it in place. And then I'm going to bring my needle back up through the head, and I'm going to bring it really close to the center of that loop. And then pull the thread all the way through. And then I'm going to cross the thread over the top of the loop and then insert my needle back really close where I first brought that thread up, creating a little stitch to hold the half loop in place. And then I'll use my needle to kind of adjust the shape of my eye. And then I'll knot the ends off in the back. And that's how you embroider on two happy eyes. And that's 3 ways to add eyes to your amigurumi without using safety eyes. Hope you guys found this helpful, and let me know if you try this for your projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.